بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم نويت تعلم وتعني وتذكر والتذكير ونفع إفادة استفادة وحتى تمس بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم ودعاء إلى هدى ودلال على الخير دعاء وسلام وضاطي وكبي والدعاء به سبحانه وتعالى اللهم أنمنا بما ينفعنا وينفعنا بما تنمنا وانزلنا من فضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Okay, so last week we went over the aspect of certainty through spirituality. So that was more or less the focus for last week. So this week we're actually going to be switching gears. You can kind of say that for the first 4 lessons that we were doing, we were focusing on the aspect of Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the belief in Allah Himself and the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and why He is one and why do we believe in Him in Himself. So after establishing our belief in Allah and the reasons why we say that Allah exists and trying to obtain an aspect of certainty in the existence of Allah, then after that point it comes a question. Okay, if I affirm that Allah is true, if I affirm that there is only one God and there can only be one God, where do I go next? What is my relationship to this God? Was there expectation? So on and so forth. So as Muslims, generally speaking, we understand the aspect of the messengership of all the messengers. We accept the messengership not just of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, but we accept the messengership of Jesus. We accept the messengership of Noah. We accept the messengership of Abraham, so on and so forth. However, before we go to that point, again, how do we understand or how do we know that a person that claims to be a messenger or claims to be a prophet is truly a prophet? Because we have many different types of people who have claimed and still to this day will claim an aspect of prophecy. So how do we distinguish between the ones who are, full of hot air, so to speak, and the ones that are actually truly being truthful, if that's even the case? So from the standpoint of Islam, what has happened is that, for one, is there a difference between a prophet and a messenger? I'm asking the question. Is there a difference? Is there a difference between a prophet and a messenger?
I think so. But I can't say what it is. To me, I feel like
there is. Okay. Now, the reason why I asked that question is because, not all of us even know if there is a difference. Because, for example, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he's sometimes referred to as Ayyuhan Nabi, and then other times he's referred to as Ayyuha Rasul. Oh you prophet, oh you messenger.
Yeah. But is that just like, I guess what's the question I tried to ask? When people are translating, do they sometimes use that word messenger instead of saying prophet, or?
No, actually in the Arabic language itself, you have a difference. So Nabi represents prophets, Rasul represents messenger. So, for example, Risala in Arabic actually means a message. And so a person who is the carrier of that message is called a Rasul, where a Nabi is referred to as a prophet. So the thing is that there actually is a difference between a prophet and a Rasul, and a messenger. The basic concept that we have in Islam is that every messenger is a prophet, but not every prophet is a messenger. So I'll repeat that again. I'll repeat it one more time. Every messenger is a prophet, but not every prophet is a messenger. And I'm going to explain how that works. However, first and foremost, we have to establish this concept of, there actually being a difference between a prophet and a messenger. Now, still going back to this question, well, how do we know who truly is claiming to be a prophet or a messenger and that their message is true? Well, Islamically, in our present times today, we would say that the aspect of prophecy and messengership has ended. And we say that's because we have confirmation for the one that we consider to be the last messenger and the last prophet. We say that prophecy has ended, and the only other aspect of prophecy that's going to come is going to be when Jesus returns to earth. However, he's not going to come with a new message. However, again, going back to this concept of how do we understand who is a prophet or who is a messenger? Going back to the times when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had revealed the prophets and the messengers. One of the aspects that has to be in accordance to all prophets. So now, at this point, I'm going to be mentioning things that are related to prophets in general. So remember we said that all messengers are prophets, but not all prophets are messengers. So this is something that is going to be the case for all prophets.
So every prophet is...
Every messenger is a prophet, but not every prophet is a messenger. And again, as we go along, we're going to give what those distinguishing factors are between a prophet and a messenger. However, what I'm going to give now, is inclusive of all those that can be considered to be a prophet. Of the first things that we know of someone who's going to claim the aspect of prophecy, and it's one of those things that is just kind of like a common sense aspect, is that they have to be truthful. Yeah, that just seems like a common sense type of thing. But the aspect of them being truthful is this, is that even before they proclaim any type of prophecy or they proclaim any type of messengership in relation to God, they have to be known as someone who is truthful. Meaning that they are not to be of those who are known to be liars, prior to them claiming an aspect of prophecy or aspect of messengership. Is that anyone that is known to be a liar, automatically we would never, say that that person can be a prophet or a messenger. This is similar to the aspect of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When we went over the seerah, when we went over his biography, and you remember the names that he was given even before he received revelation. In the sake of time, I'll just remind you. He was known as Al-Amin. Al-Amin being what? The trustworthy one. Or the truthful one. Now, the other aspect is something that I kind of alluded to just now, is that they have to be trustworthy. Meaning that they are not people who break their trust. Now, I was trying to see if someone's going to say, isn't truthfulness indicative of trustworthiness? Not necessarily. So the aspect of truthful versus trustworthy is that truthful, that means that I'm known to tell the truth. I'm honest. However, trustworthiness, that means that I'm also a person that gives the rights to other people that they are deserving of. And not everyone that is truthful is necessarily trustworthy. I'll give you an example.
So basically, I won't lie to you, but
I may not be able to keep a trust. Yeah.
Steal from you.
No, it may not be an aspect of stealing, but for example, there are some people who you can believe them. They're truthful. Sometimes they can be, bluntly truthful, harshly truthful. However, if you give them some money, that they may not intentionally try to steal from you or anything like that, but they're just not responsible. So
not being responsible and trustworthy?
Yeah. So the aspect of it is that if I give, the aspect that we're talking about in trust is that if I give you your rights that you are entitled to. So meaning that I can be in a situation where I'm truthful with you, but I'm just not trustworthy. So like if I'm a person that, I'm always losing things. In that sense, I'm not trustworthy. I may be truthful. I'll tell you honestly, I lost it. I don't know what happened. So-and-so came over and it just came up missing or whatever the case may be. But I'm not trustworthy in that regard. However, I may be truthful. Whereas, for example, I may be trustworthy, meaning that you can give me anything. and it's going to come back to you. I'm going to give you your rights. But I may tell you that I may, bend the truth here and there. I may tell you that, I saw a unicorn on the way here or something like that. So I could possibly be trustworthy, but not truthful. This is why, for example, we have in one of the narrations of one of the Sahaba, is that when he talked about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu he said, وَهُوَ صَادِقٌ وَمَصْدُوقٌ. Is that he's truthful, meaning sadiq. That's what sadiq implies in Arabic, that he's truthful, وَمَصْدُوقٌ, and he's trustworthy. Because again, oftentimes, yes, these will be together in a person. Is that if a person is truthful, is that, generally speaking, they'll have an aspect of trustworthiness, but it's not a necessity, meaning that these are not things that necessarily have to go together. You can have someone who's truthful, but not trustworthy. Or you can have someone that's trustworthy, but not necessarily truthful.
Can it also be if someone confides in you? Is that being trustworthy?
Well, yeah, if you go to the aspect of telling a secret and stuff like that, I remember when I was younger, the famous statement used to be, three can keep a secret as long as two of them are dead. but yeah, that could be an aspect too. That's another example of someone being truthful but not necessarily trustworthy. So like if you tell me a secret, I won't bend the truth, but I may tell so and so and so and so and so and so. Yeah.
Because I still wasn't grasping.
Yeah. But so that's another example. It's like, I'm not going to lie of what you told me, but you told me, this, and so I'm going to tell so and so and so and so.
I had a coworker who would always say, "Don't tell nobody," and so I would tell nobody. But before I could get upstairs, somebody done told me something when she done told him. So I was.
Yeah. The thing is, the at the end of the day, people are people. But these are things that we're attributing to those who are going to try to claim prophecy. Because if you're not truthful, then how can I believe anything that you say? And that has to be something established. Like it can't be like all of a sudden, oh, now I'm a prophet, now I'm truthful. Like that's not going to work with me. Because the aspect of prophecy already is that it's going to be far-fetched. Why? Because now you're talking about the aspect of receiving revelation from God. And that already is going to be far-fetched for many people. Even if a person believes in God, the aspect of you saying that you directly receiving revelation from God, that's going to be far-fetched. This is the example, for example, the likes of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. How did Abu Bakr as-Siddiq get the name as-Siddiq? One of the most famous narrations of him getting the name of Siddiq was that when the Prophet Muhammad went on his Isra Mi'raj, meaning that's that night journey where he traveled from Mecca to Jerusalem, and then from Jerusalem he ascended the seven heavens, and then he came back to Mecca, and this all happened in one night, in a physical form. And the reason why we know that it's a physical form is because it wouldn't be, abstract if it was a dream. For all intents and purposes, I can dream that I'm in Japan, London, and Paris, within one single dream that I have at night. So that's not abnormal. But to say that he physically went in the physical form, that's why it was so, big of an issue for the Arabs of that time. So when the Prophet ﷺ, he said, that he did this, and initially when he told the other people of Arabia, he only told them that he went to Jerusalem and back in one night. Now the thing is that in his time, it took months to get to Jerusalem and back. Like it wasn't, there's no way that you can do it in one night. And so when they came to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu, they had said, do you know what your companion is saying? Do you know what your friend is saying? He's saying that he traveled from Mecca to Jerusalem and back in one night. And what Abu Bakr had said was that if he said it, then it's true. And in that simple statement, he taught us a basic aspect, is that when people who are particularly hostile towards Islam or enemies towards Islam, we don't necessarily believe them just off face value, particularly when they're talking about matters of the religion. So that's why Abu Bakr said, if he said it, because you may be trying to tell me something that is untrue. He didn't even say it. Right. But at the same time, you may be telling me the truth, and I don't want to deny something that the Prophet said. So if he said it, first and foremost, I need to clarify if he said it. But if he did say it, then it's true. And then he clarified even more. He said to him, I believe that he receives revelations from the heavens. Meaning, I believe that he received revelations from God. Why is it going to be far-fetched for me to believe that God can allow him to go from Mecca to Jerusalem and back in one night? So that's the whole aspect of this aspect of truthful and trustworthy. Is that if you're going to start telling me that you receive revelation from God, I have to have confidence in you already. You can't be someone that is the opposite of these two. Yep.
Oh, I just wanted to let you know, now that you asked us, that the statement that you said about not every messenger is a prophet and vice versa, 5 minutes later, it's found saying what you mean. Because I can receive a message, but that doesn't make me a prophet.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but we're gonna get into those details as well. So, of the primary aspects is that they're truthful and trustworthy, and this is something that is known about them throughout their entire life. You look at anyone that, for example, Islamically, that we recognize as a messenger or a prophet, we always say that they were truthful and trustworthy. Which leads to one of the third aspects, that this is one of the theological differences that we have with other traditions, like Christianity, Judaism, is that they are not people of sin. And I'm just going to put not sinners for the sake of space and time. So what does this mean? What we mean here is that the prophets are not people who commit, at minimum, they do not commit major sin. So the aspect of adultery, murder, these type of things, they do not commit those things. And the majority opinion of most of the scholars of Islam, they say that they don't commit sin at all. And the primary basis for this is that if we're saying that they are going to be representatives for God, because the aspect of a prophet is that he's representing God in some type of way, it's that if he's a representative of God such that he's showing us the way to please God and worship God, then it wouldn't be appropriate for that person to be sinful. Because what would that lead to? It would lead to the aspect of sin being okay. That if this is the representative of God, he's, the perfect example for me in order to know how to worship God. If he commits sins, then that essentially would mean that, sin is okay. If I commit a sin, it's okay. Now, this does not negate the aspects of Islam that, Quli bani Adam khata, that every son of Adam makes mistakes. Because we do have the aspect of repentance in Islam. However, in terms of the prophets, in terms of them, and their example for us, they do not commit sin because they're trying to show us what is the ideal human being. And again, we have to go back to the aspect of, what we were saying before in terms of God, is that we don't associate any partnership of anyone with God. So we say that they are the ideal human being. Or, you can say this is a more controversial way of saying it, but you can say that they are the most perfect human being. But by me saying that they're the most perfect human being, I'm already including in that, by me saying human being, that they are not perfect. Because the mere aspect that you are a human being necessitates that you're not perfect. Part of the aspect of not being perfect is what? Is that we're dependent. I can't be perfect, meaning that I am free of any type of deficiency if I'm dependent. And so we say that they're the most perfect human being, that they have the same dependencies that we have as human beings, but they are the model example of that. Now, like I said before, this is contradictory to other traditions. For example, in the story of Moses, for example, they'll say that, Moses killed an individual. The story of Ibrahim, they'll say that Ibrahim lied. In the story of some of the other prophets, they'll say that they committed other types of sins. From the Islam perspective, we say that these are either misinterpreted, or in some cases, we would say that they're not true at all. So, for example, in the case of Moses and him killing someone, is that what was the actual story behind Moses in that situation? Moses was in a situation where a person from his people got into an altercation with another person. When Moses came upon the situation, what was Moses trying to do? Moses was trying to abate the situation. He was trying to stop the situation. However, Moses was also a very muscular, strong individual. So in him trying to abate the situation, he unintentionally harmed someone. He unintentionally caused someone to die. Now, the thing is that even from an American law standpoint, if you unintentionally cause someone harm in terms of, possibly causing them death when you're trying to break up a hostile situation, you're not held accountable. You're not held liable. This is part of the aspect that the Prophet ﷺ mentions, that إِنَّمَا أَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that actions are only based upon intention. And so his intention was actually to break it up. He had no intention of trying to cause this man harm. And it ended up being a situation where this man was met with some type of harm, meaning the aspect of death. But that was not his intent. If you go to the story of Ibrahim, the story of Ibrahim is that Ibrahim told a lie. And in particular, he told two lies. One was that he said that his wife was his sister. Another was that he said that the big one did it. If you look at the story of him telling people that his wife was his sister, for one, it was in a situation of duress. Like we mentioned this story before when we did the seerah, where Ibrahim alayhi salam went to a place where the king would defile the wives of the men in his society. Essentially, what we mean by that is that the king would sleep with the women in his society, whether they were married or not. It was his way of kind of injecting his, his superiority of the men of his society. That I would, basically, I'm going to, demasculate you to the point of, demasculate. I don't know. But that was his, basis. And so when Ibrahim alayhi salam came upon the situation, this is a prophet, and this is his wife, so he's not going to go for that. So he told his wife Sarah, tell them that you're my sister. And the reality is that you are my sister in Islam. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, إِنَّمَا مُؤْمِنِينَ إِخْوَةً, that verily the Muslims or the believers are a brotherhood, an extension, brother and sisterhood. And so he said it in that perspective. So technically speaking, this is one of those things similar to like we described with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, where when the man asked him, where are you from? And he said, أَنَا مِن مَا, that I'm from water. Whereas the Prophet ﷺ meant one thing, meaning that he intended that I'm made from mostly water. Whereas the man, what he received from that was that he was from a tribe that was called water. Ibrahim in the same situation. He said, say that you're my sister, but what he intended by it was that you're my sister in Islam. Now, even with the aspect of the big one did it, is that when Ibrahim alayhi salam did that, he did like this and pointed towards the biggest idol. He said the big one did it. Now, the aspect of it is that what he was indicating internally was that my thumb did it. Meaning that, you can't really grasp something without your opposable thumb. And so, we don't understand the importance of our opposable thumb until you can't use it anymore. Like, just try to go the day without using your thumb and see how your day goes. But, he was saying basically that my big one did it, my opposable thumb did it. However, him pointing towards the biggest idol, they were, saying like, you're trying to say that the biggest idol did it. Because that was part of his point, is that, he knew that they're going to say, well, the idols can't do anything. It's like, well, why do you worship them? And so this is the aspect where it was a situation where it wasn't actually a sin that he did. Was it necessarily the best, aspect? Because the scholars mention about this is that this type of speech where you say something intending one thing, but people perceive it as another thing, is something that the scholars say that you should not regularly do. But in certain situations, especially if you're in a situation that the rest, it can be done to keep you from lying. So that you can actually be in a situation where you're not actually committing a sin, in any fashion. It's similar to, like, for example, when there was a state of oppression in the time of, if I'm not mistaken, it was Imam Abu Hanifa. Imam Abu Hanifa was hiding some people in his house to keep them from the oppressive aspects of the authorities. So when they came to his house and they asked him, is anyone here? Do you have anyone in your house? He said, no one is here. And he did like this. So what he intended by that was that he was saying, no one is here, meaning that no one's in my palm. But what he knew that they would get from that he was saying that no one was here in his house. So technically, he wasn't lying because no one's in his palm. But at the same time, he was protecting the people still. And so, again, this is why we say that the prophets themselves are not sinners. And that, most of the things that we would possibly attribute to being sin is something that can definitely be explained in terms of, what is behind it. However, even the prophets, though, they're held to a higher standard. Because we do have a narration from the Prophet ﷺ that on the Day of Judgment, that the people, we're going to go to the different prophets asking for their intercession. We're going to go to Adam alayhi salam and ask Adam, intercede for us. Adam's going to say, I ate from the tree. It's not for me. Go ask Abraham. Abraham's going to say, I bent the truth a little bit. I said something that was, interpreted, differently. And he said, so don't go to me, go to Moses. Moses is going to mention, the situation that happened with him and the individual who was killed. And he's going to say, go to Jesus. Jesus is actually not going to mention anything. But he's just going to say that it's not for me. Go to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is going to be the first one to intercede. But how do we know this? We know this from prophecy. But this is why we're trying to establish, how do we affirm someone being actually a prophet? So, they have to be truthful. They have to be trustworthy. They cannot be sinners. Also, they are not attributed with, what is the proper way of saying that? They're not attributed with disgusting features. They have handsome features, should I say. What do I mean by this? What I mean by this is that a prophet will never be a person who has a type of condition that will repel people from them. So like in a time, and if you look in early books, they'll usually mention something like leprosy, because leprosy was a big thing. Yeah, leprosy was a big thing in early days. It's not as much of an issue in our times today, but in earlier generations, it was a big thing. And it caused for your skin to have, unsightful lesions and things like that. So a prophet would never be attributed with something that will cause for people to be repelled from them. Why? Because just like in today's time, if a country is going to send an ambassador, they're not going to send their foolish person. They're not going to send a person that is unkempt or any type of or sloppy. Why? Because they're representing the country and the government. So in the same type of token, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends a messenger, He's going to send someone, or a prophet, He's going to send someone who is, pleasing to individuals. He's not going to send someone who is displeasing to individuals. And so they are not attributed to having any type of disgusting type of features. It's not to say that they can't have some type of physical ailment overtake them. Prophets, they can get sick, or they can have some type of injury. For example, Moses, he had a slight lisp. And that happened when he had the coal burn his tongue. And so he had a slight lisp, but that wasn't something that would repel people from him. And this is where we get that, famous dua in the Quran, that, oh Allah, expand for me my breast, that, and make easy my affair, and remove the impediment from my tongue or my speech, so that people can understand my words. And then he said, what? And then he asked for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make a sharik with him, to give him a partner in who? His brother Harun. Because Harun was more eloquent. Harun was gifted with the gift of, the gift of speech. Moses, he was more or less gifted with the gift of strength and power. And so between the two of them, they, kind of balance each other out, so to speak. Whereas, for example, in the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he did not have another prophet with him. However, he had the likes of, for example, Umar bin Khattab, radiyallahu anhu. So the Prophet ﷺ, his overarching personality was that of compassion and softness. Umar was a little bit more rough around the edges. But it worked as a balance. The Prophet ﷺ, he had the best characteristics. Like, if you want to see the most kamal, the most perfect human being, like we talked about before, the Prophet ﷺ had that. However, he still had Umar to kind of like, be that representation of like, if we need to get there, we can. Type of thing. Like, don't let the kind features fool you. Like, if we need to go there, we have people. Yeah. It may not be me that's coming, but I got people that's, so, but again, it works out that type of balance. And this is, but the thing is that the prophets, they're also there to teach us. So the Prophet ﷺ, he was, the perfect example for a human being, but he's also teaching us. Is that, after him, we're going to have to run our affairs. So the thing is that one of the primary things that a person can do, and this is something that Umar had mentioned when he first became Khalifa as well, is that one of the best things that a person in a leadership position can do is be willing to recognize his weaknesses or her weaknesses. Why? Because everyone has them. And you need to be able to recognize them so that you can do things or put things in place to mediate them. So for example, if you're a person that is not aggressive and you're in a situation where you need to have some aspect of aggression, then you need to have somebody with you that's aggressive. Now you keep a balance between you so that there's never, overreaching on either side, but you need to have that balance. People have different strengths. Some people are aggressive, some people are softer, some people are more intelligent, some people are more what's the word I'm looking for? More eloquent in speech, so on and so forth. So you see what your weaknesses are, and you put people around you that can assist you in that. This is one of the things that, for example, even in business, people probably heard of Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad Poor Dad. One of the things that he always likes to say is that he's not the most intelligent man in the world. And he says, he's probably one of the more least intelligent people around the world. But what he says is that what I do is that I put very intelligent people around me. And that's how I make money. Is that, basically what I do is that I find, people who are smarter than me in different areas that I need them in. And that's how I make myself rich, is I surround myself with intelligent people. And so the aspect of it is that, see where your weaknesses are. And this is, part of the aspect that we talked about with ihsan. Part of the aspect of ihsan is recognizing that we have weaknesses and trying to address them. Either that we try to address them in terms of, adjusting them in ourselves, because that's, part of our tazkiyah, part of our purification of ourselves. But at the same time, trying to put, again, if we're in a situation of leadership, trying to put others around us that will assist us in it. But in general, the prophets themselves do not have features that will cause them to be repulsive to other people. So that's another characteristic that we have. Another characteristic that a prophet will have is, in Arabic, is called a mu'jiza, but in English we simply call it a miracle. Is that prophets will have miracles that are manifested upon their hands. What is the aspect of a miracle? It's the aspect of breaking the empirical norm. Remember we talked about the aspect of rational judgment, an empirical judgment, and a shar'i judgment, a religiously legal judgment. So when we talk about miracles, we're talking about breaking that empirical norm. So say, for example, again, like if I were to let this pin go and it floated, if this was a prophet, or if I was claiming prophecy, that would be an indication of my prophecy, particularly if I fulfilled these other ones, which I don't. But in any case, if it was the case that I fulfilled these other ones and I was claiming prophecy, which I'm not, and I had a miracle. And the thing is that the miracle associated with prophets is going to be the miracle of the time that they're in. So for example, this is why, for example, the miracle in the time of Moses in particular was that of magic. Because that was the big thing in Moses' time. Sorcery was a big thing. Now with Moses, it wasn't magic. It was, Allah, manifesting things that broke the empirical norm. It was a miracle. With the other people, it was magic. They were just doing sleight of hand stuffs and, different types of things of that nature that, made the people think that they were seeing certain things. This is why, for example, if you ever contemplate on the story of Moses and the magicians, why is it that the magicians so quickly submitted to Moses? All that happened was that they threw down their staffs and they turned to snakes. Moses threw down his ate them up. Why wasn't it just a thing where they just was like, wait, what magic did you have that we don't have, and so on and so forth? Why? Because they knew magic. They knew all the ins and outs. They were the experts of magic. So they knew that what Moses came with was not magic. This is not magic. That's why it was so, so convincing to them. To the point that the king said, I will cut your arms and legs off from opposite ends. Like, for most of us, like, even if we believe at that threat, it's just kind of like, you know what? You're right. I was just blown away for a quick second. You know what, King? You're right. I take it back. And even from the standpoint of Islam, it's like if you're in a state of duress, you can, technically speaking, say a lie of disbelief in order to save your life. But the scholars and the people of tafsir, the people of Quranic exegesis mention is that, they were so in depth with the aspect of magic and knowing that this was not magic, that this can only be a miracle from God, as Moses was claiming, that they were even willing to go through this aspect of torture. Like, that's how much iman that brought to them. Like, whatever you can do to us is going to be much less than if we deny our Lord at this point. Like, there's no means for us denying our Lord at this point. And this is the type of miracles that prophets come with. They come with a miracle that cannot be repeated. Like, for example, in the time of Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, what was the primary thing going on in Jesus' time? The aspect of medicine. That was the big thing. So what did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do with Jesus? He gave him the capability of medicine. So he was able to heal the leper. He was able to bring the man back to life. He was able to give life to the bird. These type of things. And this was a confirmation of the truthfulness that he was coming with. Not only that, but even from the first, get-go, because the aspect of it is that his mother Mary, alayha salam, she was a righteous woman. His uncle Zakaria, he was a prophet. His cousin Yahya, he was a prophet. Ali Imran, like, there's a whole chapter in the Quran about his family. All of them are righteous. And it's the story of Isa more or less starts with his grandmother. Because what do we have in the story of Isa? In the story of Isa, we have his grandmother. What does his grandmother do? She makes dua when she's pregnant with Mary. Yes. That's where we get that whole concept of, Ya Allah, adhakra laysa ka untha. That's, oh Allah, the male is not like the female. But the aspect of it is that Mary herself was a righteous individual. And Allah saw the righteousness of not just Mary, but her mother and the rest of her family. Like, this is why I love to read the story of, Mary and her family. Is that, for example, when you talk about Zakaria, he comes in because Zakaria is the caretaker of Mary. Allah gave him that responsibility to take care of Mary. And he was a prophet in his own right. Zakaria comes in upon Mary, and he's like, Mary, where did you get all this stuff? Because Zakaria, he's the only one that's entering upon Mary. She's a very chaste, pious woman. Zakaria is the only one that's entering in upon her. So he knows what he gave her and what he didn't. So he comes in, he's like, where did this stuff come from? And Mary is like, Allah provides to whomever He wills. And so what does it say? My wife was actually recently telling me about this in terms of one of the tafsirs. It says that the same exact place, the same exact mi'rab that Mary used to go and make her supplication dua, Zakaria went to that same exact place. And what does he make dua for? Oh Allah, bless me with a child. Like, if you're giving Mary this, and it wasn't as if Zakaria did not believe. He's a prophet. But it's one of those things, it's just like, because what happens? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala finally comes and He tells, by way of the angels, He tells Zakaria that you're going to have a son, Ismuhu Yahya. That you're going to have a son and his name's going to be Yahya. What does Zakaria say? How can I have a son? She's like, I'm getting older in years, my wife is older in years. But it wasn't the aspect of Zakaria not believing. It was the aspect of, it's one thing when you ask Allah for something, it's another thing when you actually see it come into fruition, when you actually see it manifest. Again, it's not an aspect of you truly questioning Allah. It's just kind of like, almost like, I can't believe that, this is really going to be given to me, type of thing. But the aspect of it is that these are miracles that were manifested. So Mary, she had in of herself the miraculous birth of Jesus. She was not touched by any man. And in order to clear her name coming from the noble family that she came from, what did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do? He allowed for Jesus to speak right from the cradle. Right from birth. I mean, I don't know if you can really deny that. Like, if my son came out speaking from the cradle, I'd probably faint. And I mean, but the thing is that this is why we say that the hallmark of disbelief, the hallmark of actual kufr, is when you know the truth and you try to cover it up, because people still disbelieved. Just imagine seeing this. You've seen this young child in the cradle speak, and now you still deny. That's an issue. That's the epitome of kufr. That's the epitome of disbelief. When you know the truth and you still try to cover it up. Now, this is the aspect of miracles and when it's manifested on the hands of a prophet. The reason why I'm saying this is because we believe also in Islam that people can also have miracles. And we call those karamat. So a karama is when a normal person who's not a prophet has a miracle that happens on their hands. So that can happen. However, again, we separate between a normal person versus a prophet. Prophets have to have all of these, aspects to them, and they're going to be people that claim prophecy. However, if you do have a person who claims prophecy, but he's truly a false prophet, and he does have a miracle occur, generally speaking, is going to be the opposite, where Allah may allow for a miracle to occur upon his hands, but it's meant to be a proof against him. An example that we have in Islamic history was that there was a man by the name of Musaylima al-Kadhab, Musaylima the liar. Musaylima had claimed prophecy. Now the problem with Musaylima al-Kadhab, in one instance that happened with him, in terms of this aspect of miracles, is that he heard about the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that one time one of his companions had an affliction in his eye, and the Prophet ﷺ took some of his blessed saliva, he put it in that companion's eye, and his eye was healed. That was an aspect of a miracle. Musaylima had a situation where a person came to him who was following him, unfortunately, and he was blind in one eye. So he came to Musaylima kind of, hoping for the same type of thing, that Musaylima, being a prophet, that he would be able to clear the blindness in his eye. So Musaylima went about, saying whatever he said and trying to do whatever he did. And what happened was that after it, the man went blind in the other eye. So now he became completely blind. But that was the aspect of a miracle to denote the lying of Musaylima. So again, the aspect of miracles is that they can happen on the hands of normal people, but when it comes to a prophet, it's something that is absolutely confirmed. And this is why in the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the Quran is considered to be the greatest miracle. Now for us, especially in our modern context, it comes a difficulty to try to explain to people the Quran being a miracle. Because as one of our teachers had mentioned, he said that, in order to understand this, you have to study Arabic and then, get, familiar with the Arabic poetry of that time, and then, the aspect of literary, working and so on and so forth. Like for many people, we're not in that stage. So this is why one of the other aspects of the miracle or miraculous nature of the Quran is you could look at it from for example, the standpoint of science. Is that, there are many things that are mentioned in the Quran that could not have been known until, way after the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. For example, the aspect of the embryo in the mother. I don't know when what is it called? When a woman, the ultrasound. I don't know when the ultrasound was invented, but it wasn't invented 1400 years ago. But we have, as detailed of a description as you can have, giving the time frame of the process. Even in a statement from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself, he says that إِنَّ أَحَدَكُمْ يَجْمَعُ خَلْقِهِ فِي بَطْنِ أُمِّهِ 40 نَوْمًا نُطْفَةً ثُمَّ يَكُونُ عَلَقَةً مِثْلُ ذَلِكَ ثُمَّ يَكُونُ مُضْغَةً مِثْلُ ذَلِكَ. That verily any one of you has his creation in the stomach of his mother for 40 days as a nutfa, as a drop. Then another 40 days like that, he's an alaka, which is a clot of flesh. And then for another 40 days, he's forming until he becomes a mutqa, essentially a lump of flesh. And so we have this concept where it's something that we understand cannot have been known during that time, but we've confirmed it 1400 years later. And so that's one of the other aspects of the miraculous nature of the Quran, and also the aspect of the speech of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself. And so these are the indications that we have that a prophet is truthful. One of the other aspects that a prophet will have is knowledge of the unseen, which you can somewhat attribute to the aspect of miracles, but it's the aspect of a prophet being able to sometimes predict things that are going to happen in the future, or just understanding something that no one could have known, just on their own. And that's another way that prophets, are defined, is that they are given knowledge of the unseen. This is why, for example, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, can inform us that the last day will not come until you see that you see the barefoot, destitute Arab competing in the construction of tall buildings. Now, the thing is that, actually throughout Islamic history, scholars have said that, they've witnessed that, because actually prior to more modern times, or not even necessarily modern times, but, prior to the time, after the time of like the Tabi'een and the Sahaba, the early generations, it was more or less considered to be sacrilegious to build a building taller than the Kaaba itself. That was like sacrilegious, because that was kind of like, kind of an indication of this aspect of bringing on the last day. Whereas now, if you go to Mecca, one of my teachers pointed out is that, when the Prophet ﷺ talked about, this aspect of like, these signs of the last hour, he was asked, Mata as-sa'a, when is the hour? Now, sa'a in Arabic also means clock or watch. Now, if you go to Saudi Arabia, right above the Kaaba itself, you have the clock tower, a towering figure that you can see from pretty much anywhere close to Mecca. Like, one of the ways that, when I was in Mecca, one of the ways that I knew that we were going in the right direction or not is that, are we going towards the clock tower or not? Because you can see it, for miles away. It's that big. Not only that, but for example, anyone that's ever been to Abu Dhabi or Dubai, or ever seen Abu Dhabi or Dubai, they literally are competing in building tall buildings. That's their like claim to fame. Like I always said, it's like, it's kind of like that concept that you see in movies, don't press the red button. And it just seems to me, it's just like, particularly like Abu Dhabi, Dubai, it's like, why do you have to press the red button? Like, just because the Prophet ﷺ said it's going to happen, do we have to, like, be the ones to initiate it? But this is part of the aspect of prophecy, is that they will be able to tell us about things that are the unseen. And again, from that aspect, some of it we will not be able to know. Meaning that we'll not be able to know it until possibly we die. Others, we will be able to see it. Because again, this is an aspect of us proving that this individual is actually truthful in what he's claiming. Because again, this is a very far-fetched claim. Now, this is the aspect of prophecy that all prophets will share in. So now it gets to the question, well, how do we differentiate between prophets and messengers? If I said initially that there's a difference between prophets and messengers. Prophets have all these features. So that also means that messengers have all these features. One of the main distinguishing factor between prophets and messengers is the aspect of calling. In Arabic we say risala. So messengers, they have all these aspects of prophecy, but they also have the responsibility of calling. What do I mean by that? That's what I'm going to explain now.
You said accept calling, or they have that?
Messengers have the responsibility of calling. That's what they do have. Now, there's two aspects in this aspect of calling. One is that they have the responsibility to call the people to whatever message they've received from Allah. Whatever message they received from God, they have the obligation, the responsibility to call the people to it. Secondly, they have a law that supersedes the law that came before it. Now, these two aspects I'm going to explain. The first one, in terms of having the responsibility to call, probably the best example is going back to Musa and Harun, Moses and Aaron. When you look at the story of Moses and Aaron, when Moses leaves Aaron in charge of the Bani Israel, Moses goes to Mount Sinai for 40 days and receives, he has the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that comes directly to him, so on and so forth. What does he do? He leaves Aaron in charge. Aaron, you're in charge. What happens while Moses is gone? The people start to worship the golden calf. And what happens? Musa comes back. He's so upset that the tablets that he just received from Allah, just got them. What does he do? He smashes them. He's that upset. Now, the basis of it is, though, is that Moses is a messenger. Aaron is a prophet. Moses, he's been commanded to call the people. Aaron, he's been commanded to call the people to truth, but not necessarily to call them. Meaning that when the people come to him, he has to give them the truth, but he has not been commanded to call them. Moses is different. He's a messenger. He's been commanded to tell them the truth and to call them to him. That's that aspect of having responsibility of calling. Another example, you go to the story of Yusuf. Yusuf alayhi salam. You have a whole chapter on his story. And there's so many lessons that you could take from the chapter of Yusuf, it's ridiculous. But in any of that story, do you ever see Yusuf actually calling the people to him? No. You never see Yusuf actually calling people to him or coming with a new law. Because actually he ends up just being, a high level, however you want to put it, advisor or member of the king's, authority. He becomes like, a secretary or whatever high position you want to equate it to, but he does not supersede any type of law. And that's because Yusuf alayhi salam, what was his purpose? He was a prophet. He was not a messenger. So when people came to him, he came with the truth. When they asked him to interpret dreams, he's going to interpret it. You try to, corrupt him, he's going to stand up for the truth, even if it's going to cost him imprisonment and so on and so forth. However, he did not try to call anyone. Whereas if you look at the story of, for example, Nuh alayhi salam. Nuh does what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that he calls his people Alfa sana ila khamsin. He has the responsibility of calling his people for 950 years. This is one of the things that I mentioned to people who are very, very pro, dawah work. I'm not against the concept of dawah work, but I always try to, remind people is that, when you're doing dawah, you're trying to, inform people about Islam and so on and so forth. One of the primary traits that you need to have is patience. You look at all the prophets, you didn't have the people just, coming in droves when they came with the message. And they were the prophets. They were the people who met all of these qualifications. Many of us, if we have one of them, we're doing good. And then when we come to people and we give them 5 minutes of dawah, we're like, why haven't you accepted the message? It's like, Noah gave dawah for 950 years and he's a messenger. And people still didn't accept it. So, but the thing is that Noah had that responsibility. And every messenger is sent to a certain people. So all messengers were sent to a certain people, and this is what distinguishes the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ from other messengers, is that we say about him, he was sent to all of mankind. Moses was sent to who? The Bani Israel. Jesus was sent to who? The Bani Israel. Noah was sent to his people. Lut was sent to his people, so on and so forth. Every prophet is going to be sent to his people. The Prophet ﷺ was distinguished in that, is that he was sent to all of mankind, such that his message superseded every messenger. The second one, in terms of the aspect of calling, is that a messenger comes with a law that supersedes the law that came before it. So that means that, for example, when Musa alayhi salam came, his message superseded that of Abraham and Noah and so on and so forth. When Jesus came, his message superseded that of Moses. And when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ came, his message superseded that of Jesus. However, for example, when Yusuf came, again, he didn't come with any new law. It was a law that had already existed. When Zachariah came, he didn't come with a new law. It was a law that already existed. So prophets, they do not come with a new law. Messengers, they do. So these is the primary aspects that distinguishes a messenger from a prophet. The aspects of what is their relationship to calling. Are they required to call? And do they come with the law that supersedes the law that preceded them? Now, because I don't want to we're running out of time, so I want to make sure that we can cover all the aspects of prophecy today. Now, the other aspect of prophecy is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned that He sent a prophet to all people. So the common number that's given, but ultimately it's one of those situations where we say Allah knows best. Meaning that only Allah truly knows the amount of prophets and messengers that He sent. But the common number that's given is that there have been 124,000 prophets that have been sent and 313 messengers. Yeah, 124,000 prophets, 313 messengers. However, take those numbers with a grain of salt. Like I said, we don't necessarily have anything definitive that says definitely that these are the numbers. However, these are the numbers that have been given. But what we do know is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent messengers to all people. So this is why, for example, some have questioned, for example, if, for example, the Buddha was a possible prophet that people had distorted his message after him. So the thing is that, there's nothing in Islamic, in our Islamic theology that will confirm whether or not Buddha was actually a prophet or not. However, some scholars just have mentioned, from the example perspective, that it's possible that the Buddha was a prophet that people distorted his message after him. So that's, one of the bases that we have. And the thing is that all of them, without exception, they call to the primary aspect of what? Wahdaniyah, oneness, meaning the oneness of God. No, all the prophets, messengers, they all affirm oneness, Tawheed. And none of them have ever said to worship me or worship something other than God Himself. And again, this goes back to our discussion about God Himself and why God cannot have a partner, a co-sharer, any of those type of things. All the prophets, they call to this aspect of oneness. They are all united in this message. Now, specifically in the Quran, there are 25 prophets that are mentioned. 25 prophets that are agreed upon, should I say. Those 25 prophets, they include Adam, Ilyasa, Ayub, Dawood, Dhul-Qifl, Ilyas, Harun, Hud, Ibrahim, Idris, Ishaq, Ishmael, Adam, Ayub, Ilyasa, Dawood, Dhul-Qifl, Ilyas, Harun, Hud, Ibrahim, Idris, Ishaq, Isa, Ishmael, Lut, Musa, Muhammad, Nuh, Sulaiman, Shuaib, Saleh, Yunus, Yahya, Yaqub, Zakaria, Yunus, Yahya, Yaqub, and I'm missing one. Zakaria, Yunus, Yahya, Yaqub. Of course, when I'm on camera, this is when I forget one. Adam, Ayub, Ilyasa, Dawood, Dhul-Qifl, Ilyas, Harun, Hud, Ibrahim, Idris, Ishaq, Ishmael, Ibrahim, Lut, Musa, Muhammad, Nuh, Sulaiman, Shuaib, Saleh, Yusuf, Yahya, Yunus, Yaqub, and Zakaria. There you go. Those are 25. Now, the thing is that part of our Iman, for example, the 6 articles of Iman, is that we believe in all the messengers. Now, the thing is that we don't necessarily, like, for example, me memorizing them is not a necessary obligation for all Muslims. If you do memorize them, great. But it's not an obligation that you memorize them per se by name. However, when we say that it's an obligation for you to believe in them, that means that you do not say that I disbelieve in any of them. So, for example, there's some people, they'll say that I believe in Muhammad, but I don't believe in Jesus. Like, for example, I had a friend of mine who used to say that he believed in Muhammad, but he said he didn't believe in Jesus because from his perspective, there was not enough historical evidence to prove that Jesus actually existed. Islamically, that's not acceptable. We say that you have to believe in all of the prophets. And so we believe in all of them. So whether or not you can name them all by name, in particular 25 that we know of for certain, that is not the main purpose. The main purpose is that you affirm all of their prophecy and that their original message was true. That the message that they were sent with, the unadulterated message, was true. Now, the other aspect is that there are some discussions about some of the other people mentioned in the Quran. So, for example, the likes of Dhul Khifl. Who's Dhul Khifl? Dhul Khifl is, Dhul Khifl is the prophet. I didn't mean to say Dhul Khifl. I meant to say, Subhanallah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. The individual that Moses alayhi salam went to go visit. Khidr. That's his name. Sorry. Khidr. Khidr is debated about whether or not he was a prophet. Why is this the case? If we look at the story of Khidr and Moses, what happened? Moses goes to Khidr because Moses informed that Khidr has knowledge that Moses is not. And Moses asks, can you teach me some of the things that you know? Khidr says from the very beginning, you will not be able to have patience with me, because these are things that you're not aware of. And what does Khidr go about doing? First he sinks a boat, then he kills a child, and then he erects a wall for people that had treated them very poorly and very badly. So now the thing is that Khidr, at the end of the story, he explains to Moses why he does all these things. And he says that this is all knowledge that, essentially that he attained from Allah. The reason why the scholars debate about whether or not he's a prophet or not is that particularly the first two things that he did, that can only be something that is sanctioned by God himself. Like, you cannot kill someone and say that it's okay if that is not sanctioned by God. It's in particular when we're talking about it from the Quranic perspective, because we know from the Quranic perspective that these were all things that was sanctioned by God. That's why it's mentioned in the Quran. However, only ways that can be is that he had to receive this, knowledge from God. So the question becomes, was it revelation such that he was a prophet, or was it similar, for example, to the mother of Moses? Because the mother of Moses, what did she do? She took her child Moses after being inspired by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and she placed him into the river. Essentially, we would call that, if a woman would do that in our times today, that would be, if the child lived, that would be child endangerment. If it died, that would be murder. And so she can only do that. Why? Because she had inspiration from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the scholars, they debate, was Khidr just receiving inspiration from Allah similar to Moses' mother? Or was he actually a prophet? We don't have enough certainty to declare that he was a prophet. So the 25 that we do know, that's the ones that we mentioned. But I'm just mentioning that some of the other figures that we see in the Quran, it's debated about whether or not they were prophets or not. But these are the 25 that we necessarily know. And so these are some of the basic aspects that we have to understand about messengership and prophecy. So that, nowadays, we are not going to be fooled by these type of things. Because one of the things that's going to happen to us in the time is that we believe as Muslims is that the Dajjal is going to come back. And not come back, but the Dajjal is going to show up in the time. The Dajjal, he's going to be a people who has miracles. However, he's not going to have any of these other features. But the thing is that from the basis of his miracles, people are going to be fooled. And so we have to have a basis to understand is that how can we take someone on as being truthful in their claim to prophecy? Because like I said before, that's a big, what they say, that's a hard one to swallow, so to speak. But we have to have this foundation to understand why we would say that they're truthful. Because outside of just the general belief in God, like when we talked about God, we mentioned it in terms of just the average person, just generally speaking, how do we know that God exists? Now we're going to start going to some more specifics. And this is going to get to religious specific aspects. Because, for example, Christians believe in God. Jewish people believe in God. Buddhists believe in God. so on and so forth. There are many different groups that believe in God. So how do we understand who actually is the ones that represents what God wants for us on earth? And so this is why we have to go through this process. How do we know that a prophet is truthful? And so, inshallah ta'ala, my intentions for next week is that we'll talk about the aspects of the revealed books, the scriptural texts. So now we're going to start going to the aspect of hukm shari, the scriptural texts, and how do we start to understand those in relation to what we believe as Muslims, and also countersuppose what people other than Muslims believe. And also, depending on the time that it takes for us to do that, we may also try to go into the aspect of belief in the angels as well. And so inshallah ta'ala we'll stop here, and then we'll pick up from next week. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alam husbana net wakil. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
That's the question. The last thing you said, the job. You said they will perform miracles.
The Dajjal, yes, he will perform miracles.
He will perform miracles, but they won't be prophets
No, he will not be a prophet.
because they don't have the other.
Yeah, he will not. The Dajjal himself, he will not have these other aspects. And also, there'll be certain signs of the Dajjal that we'll know. Like for us as Muslims, we already know that, for example, anyone that claims any type of divinity or any of that is, done for, except for the aspect of Jesus. But he's going to come at the end of the time, and he's going to confirm, the aspect of Islam. Again, I'm talking about from the standpoint of Islamic theology. Now, the aspect of the Dajjal is that he will have, miracles being performed on his hands, and that will fool many people. But again, he'll have certain features that we've been informed of by the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to let us know. Like one of the main features that's mentioned is that he'll be blind in one eye. And so, that will be a major feature. So this goes, outside the aspects of number 4, for example. Other situations I've mentioned that, for the true believer, he'll be able to see the word kafir written on his forehead. Essentially the word disbeliever written on his forehead. But that's for the person who's a true believer. Dajjal. Usually they spell it Dajahl. I think that's how they usually spell it. Dajjal.
That's that show on Netflix, right?
Which one? I don't usually watch Netflix, so I don't know. They have a show called Dajjal.
Or something like that, based on that.
Oh, they may. I don't know. Yeah. But no, yeah. So essentially the Dajjal is just the way, because in the Quran he's referred to as Masih ad-Dajjal, the Antichrist. That's who he is, the Antichrist. And it's going to be Jesus and also the Mahdi who will come and do away with him. But before that happens, he's going to wreak havoc throughout the world. Alright, so inshallah we'll stop here. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alam wa asbana wa ni'mal wakil. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.